Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you receive your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcissa Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system, where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul, New York State, 518-474-8390, to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. And also another quick announcement. Go to pleasedoyourjob.com and sign the petition. That's pleasedoyourjob.com and sign that petition. I have a brand new guest on. I have Adam Dodge on. He is the co-founder of EndTAB, Ending Technology-Enabled Abuse. Adam's work is characterized by his dedication to addressing the existing and future threats posed by technology to victims of crime and gender-based violence. He has written extensively on technology-enabled abuse, non-consensual pornography, co-authored a domestic violence advisory on the emerging threat of deepfakes, and created the first resource guide for victims of non-consensual deepfake pornography. His work is in the field of digital impersonation, has been featured in the Washington Post and Mashable. Adam spends a great deal of his time delivering innovative technology-enabled abuse trainings to victim-serving organizations and government agencies around the world. And I totally welcome you to the podcast. I'm so impressed with what you have done.
Thanks so much.
So, and you're also the former legal and technology director of Laura's House. And you've led a department that has processed over 1,200 domestic violence restraining order cases annually. So you've been busy.
Yeah, that's how I got sort of my foothold in my work with victims of gender-based violence was at Laura's House.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you get involved in all this technology?
Well, it was a matter of necessity. As you just sort of mentioned, that at Laura's House, we were processing and working with a very high volume of domestic violence restraining order cases. And what became very apparent was that technology facilitated abuse or technology enabled abuse was becoming ubiquitous in those cases.
Mm-hmm.
It was either something not too severe, like text messages or social media direct messages that were being used to intimidate or exert power and control or coercive control over a victim, or it got a little more sophisticated, often with concerns being voiced like, my partner is reading my emails or reading my text messages, and I don't know how it's happening, or I feel like I'm being monitored and followed everywhere I go. And for someone working at a domestic violence organization like myself and my colleagues, it was not a good feeling not being able to act or respond or have a playbook when a victim reported they were being harmed online or via technology. None of us got into the work for the money and the fame, right? We got into the work to help people, and technology is really good at making it really hard to help victims. So when I sought out training for myself and my staff, it just didn't exist. I was able to get a cybersecurity firm in the area to come do or provide a pro bono training to the staff of my organization. And it was almost immediately apparent that this was not the right fit for us, because they were focused on, very sophisticated attacks and hackers and nation state actors attacking companies and businesses and banks. And that's just not what tech facilitated gender-based violence is. It's usually somebody who is not sophisticated at all, but has access to the victim's technology, apps, passwords, things like that. And so I set about creating the solution that I needed in that moment, which was a training for non-tech experts that work with victims. And when word sort of spread that I was doing this and it was having impact, other people began to reach out and ask me to provide trainings to them. And that's how I created EndTAB. So that's how I got involved in the technology side of things. I'm not a technologist. I don't have a computer science degree. I'm a lawyer. I don't have any of that background. So, but the big reveal is you don't really need to be tech savvy or a tech expert to do this work, because at the end of the day, it's still the familiar forms of abuse that we're all used to dealing with and navigating, just being manifested online and on devices and via apps. And when you look at it through that lens, the approach becomes much more achievable when you're not dealing with some super sophisticated attacker, and it's just somebody who has the same level of tech expertise that you do.
Have you run across anyone with some really wild ways of getting into a person's phone or laptop that you've never seen before?
Well, there's always unanswered questions. Sometimes there are certainly cases where we don't know how something is happening, and sometimes, because to really strip a device or down to its nuts and bolts to forensically determine how somebody is accessing the device without consent, those options are often unavailable, and we simply focus on safety protocols. But I would say that the way that we see people, the way that we see unsophisticated people doing really sophisticated things to access a victim's device without consent is the use of stalkerware. So stalkerware continues to evolve and develop, and some of these newer versions are things we've never seen before. But stalkerware is, sorry, I thought I had my do not disturb on, and I do, so I don't know why that ding came in.
I didn't hear it.
Oh, you didn't hear it? Okay, good. So stalkerware is an app, a malicious app that can be placed on a device, usually by having physical access to the device. And once that app is planted or downloaded or added to a device, it disappears. But that doesn't mean it's dormant. What it's doing is it's essentially sending everything that the owner of the device does on the phone to the person who installed it. And it can do things beyond that. It can activate the phone's microphone and turn it into a listening device. It can take pictures without the phone user's knowledge, things like that. Real James Bond level stuff that is now, no longer fantasy in a James Bond movie, but is something that anybody could, purchase and acquire from the internet and download onto a device without a victim's knowledge.
I know there's, you've got these personality disorders that enjoy this. They enjoy just going after someone, and generally from, I would think, relationships that didn't work out, and they just don't want to lose the person. And they just continue to harass them, which, how do you ever get this to stop? Or can you? You probably can't.
Well, I mean, you can. I mean, there are things you can do. Every situation's different, right? It's really no different than power and control or abuse dynamics in the physical world, right? You could get a restraining order, you can do all these different things, but getting it to stop is very difficult. And it's true with technology too. It's about plugging holes and understanding how people, especially unsophisticated or just normal average tech users, will use the internet and technology to violate somebody's privacy and exert power and control over them. To give you an example, just with the stalkerware example, there's stalkerware has sort of a good news, bad news situation with it when you're trying to address it. One, it's very difficult to verify whether stalkerware is on a device because it's very good at hiding, but it's much more achievable to remove it from a device. So by factory resetting a device, it should, and only reloading apps onto the device that you recognize, it in the overwhelming majority of circumstances will remove stalkerware from that device. So a simple, and this is what I mean by you don't have to be a tech expert to do this stuff, is factoring a factory resetting device back to its factory settings usually does the trick. And we're careful not to tell people to just go get a new phone, right? Because for a lot of folks, especially low income folks, that's not an option. And you're not really empowering them with tools to prioritize their digital safety in a meaningful way. That's something we really, really focus on here at EndTAB, is getting people to treat their digital safety like their physical safety, because we just don't, there's a real wholesale lack of understanding of what digital safety even means. And we're even further away from sort of community-wide adoption on how to prioritize our digital safety in a meaningful way. And so that's something that we're really pushing to sort of develop the skills and instincts for folks to really feel safe and be empowered to feel safe, whether they're online or offline.
Well, even if you get a new phone, you download the stuff from your old phone into the new phone, so you're still stuck with that app.
No, so that's why I said only download the apps you recognize, because a stalkerware app, one, it probably won't show up in the backups, in the cloud backup. But even if it does, we just want to make sure that folks recognize every app and understand what it does before they reload it onto their phone. And if it's something they don't recognize, then that's a very good indication that they shouldn't put it back on their device. And that's a way to empower people to keep their devices safe, especially if they run into that situation in the future. They want to have that tool and that skill in their back pocket.
I'm sure you see that this causes a lot of PTSD, CPTSD.
Yes, it's so something that I focus on pretty heavily in my work is tech-enabled trauma, and how this type of trauma experienced from tech-enabled or tech-facilitated violence is a different animal. It's a very unique form of trauma experienced by victims that, and I'm not certified to give trauma-informed trainings, but what I do provide is insights into tech-enabled trauma that people can use to incorporate into their existing trauma-informed practices. Because the unique thing about tech-enabled trauma is if you're being abused or harassed or intimidated via device that you have to rely on to survive and thrive, then you're constantly being put in a state of re-traumatization, right? Every time you use the social media platform that's also being used to harass and bully and stalk you, you're putting yourself in a space that doesn't symbolically represent your trauma, but literally represents your trauma. And we don't usually see that in the physical world. We don't see, a victim of sexual violence in the have to walk down the same dark alley or the same alley where that occurred 50 times a day, right? That would be, that would be the opposite of trauma informed, right? So, but with our devices, and because we have an overall lack of understanding of how tech facilitated abuse works and tech enabled trauma as a result, and this sort of reliance we have on our devices, it creates sort of a recurring trauma response, and is really fertile ground for re-traumatization.
And I'm sure you tell people, maybe go talk to someone, or are they able to do that at Laura's house?
Well, I'm not at Laura's house anymore. And they don't have a technology director there anymore. But the answer is yes. I would argue that any community-based or victim-serving organization is a resource for victims of tech-facilitated abuse, because whether the abuse is happening online or offline, it's still abuse. And if that organization has mental health services, or counselors or therapists there, or just people who need support like advocacy or case management, then absolutely yes. You don't have to be able to unmask and demystify every challenge that a victim's having related to their technology to help them process the trauma. And so, I mean, I train a ton of nonprofits to navigate digital safety in a meaningful way, along with the military and law enforcement and judges and a bunch of different folks. But what I'm really pushing them to do is, hey, you don't have to create a whole new skill set here. Just make a pivot, a small adjustment to what you already doing to serve or work with victims, to also include their online experiences. And so it would be the same with technology enabled abuse and trauma. It's be open to the fact that having an intimate image shared without consent is a devastating act. Being sent an unwanted nude image is cyber flashing, which is sexual violence. Really legitimize these forms of abuse as being as serious as any other form of abuse, and as a result, as serious as any other form of trauma. And when we start from that place, we can really help survivors, regardless of whether we feel comfortable navigating or answering questions about technology. Because at the end of the day, tech facilitated violence is much less about the tech and much more about the violence.
Definitely. Tell me about the judges. What do you talk to them about?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've trained thousands of judges in just a couple of years, actually, because they're very interested in. So I talk to judges about a variety of different things. One aspect is about an emerging issues related to technology and abuse, and the impact on evidence. So we're living in an age now where anybody can fabricate videos, edit, modify videos, insert people into videos, clone voices, create fake images with, using an app or a website, and just simply clicking a button. So it's very easy. So what I often will talk to judges about on that front is really demystifying or explaining what the landscape looks like when it comes to manipulating photos, videos, audio, things like that. And then helping them think through ways, whether it's, authentication or laying foundation of these things. We're used to believing we're seeing is believing, hearing is believing. That's sort of been, an old standard, right? That's no longer the case. And so if somebody tries to enter into evidence a video or a voicemail that purports to, support their arguments, we need to look deeper, because it's too easy to fabricate that now. So if somebody is saying, look, here's this voicemail I got from the party to be restrained in a restraining order case, and it's them threatening me and threatening to harm our children and all these different things. If I'm that judge and I have an awareness that it's very easy to impersonate people's and clone their, I mean, Apple is coming out with a new operating system in the fall that's going to have a clone your voice feature. So it's literally going to clone your voice, and if people, and will allow text messages to be listened to in your voice, that and things like that. So our voices are low-hanging fruit these days. And so, but if a judge is unaware that this technology exists, then they may allow that evidence to come in over the objections of other people saying, well, that's not me. I never left that voicemail, which they hear all the time, right? I didn't do that. That wasn't me. Denial, 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 denial. but we need to pair that with an understanding that actually that's a legitimate concern, and we need to look at phone records to see when was the voicemail left. Does the length of the voicemail match the phone records, right? Like, show me on your phone what, is the voicemail being introduced as a separate audio file, or is it directly from the person's phone? Where is this coming from? We have to look at secondary forms of verification of audio and video evidence today, because it's where we're going. And the last thing I want to see is people submitting evidence and decisions being issued based on that evidence, simply because the judge was unaware that the technology existed. So it's a lot. I do a lot of that. And then also just demystifying, and I use the word demystifying a lot, but sharing how tech facilitated domestic violence works today, from, impersonation online to unauthorized access of a victim's account, and how to verify if that is what's going on. You don't have to have a technical person to verify if, another party is getting into victims' accounts. Understanding how catfishing and impersonation is really taken leaps forward. Non-consensual tracking, how people are tracked without their knowledge or consent, and how judges or lawyers or advocates or law enforcement or military personnel or folks that work in higher education can actually have agency in those moments and verify with confidence and understand with confidence whether or not what is being alleged is true. And so those are the ways that I approach those trainings with judges, so judges can feel more comfortable talking about those things. So judges can know, okay, what's being said right now, I know from this training is something that is happening and is not as far-fetched as I otherwise would have believed. And I know what kind of questions to ask, or probing questions to ask, to learn whether or not what they're alleging, those allegations hold water or not.
I wouldn't know where to start with that, with all of that, especially with that AI and the voice, just mimicking your voice. If you answer the phone, they can just take your voice.
Oh, well, there's already, and there's a lot. I mean, Microsoft's voice cloning tech needs 3 seconds of audio of your voice to clone your voice. So it's very easy to get the audio to clone somebody's voice. And so, we're worried. I mean, I'm worried about this on a lot of fronts. I think the group that is going to be hardest hit by voice cloning are seniors, older adults, on the elder abuse front, from scams. And we're already seeing people effectuating financial scams targeting older folks by impersonating a loved one, and which this is already happening. Hey, I'm so-and-so calling from, whatever, this Arizona jail. Your grandson is here. He can't reach his parents. He needs $2,000 to be Western Union to this right now. I'll have it once that's done. He can make his phone call. He can do these things, and people are doing it, right? And online is a very accessible way to do that too. So we live in the most hyper-connected time in human history, and so folks who are potential victims of financial crime or tech facilitated financial crime, and who are older, they've got time on their hands, they're online, they've got assets. And so that's why, financial crime and elder abuse in the digital age are very, very problematic right now.
Yeah, that's too bad, because actually, my mother fell for that. She got a call, and she ran to my father. I mean, she was like 80.
Yeah.
She says, our grandson's in prison. And my father's like, what? And he took the phone and said, who is this? And they hung up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not making that and usually when I would say 50% of the time I tell talk about tech facilitated elder abuse, somebody says, oh yeah, my parent or a parent of a friend had this happen to them. And so it's just going to get worse. And I want to be very clear. I'm not a doom and gloom person. I'm not don't lead with fear and try to scare people into doing things. I just want to raise awareness about these issues, because at the end of the day, awareness is really critical with this emerging technology stuff, because that can prevent a lot of this from happening. We need really everybody, but if we're going to stick with this, elder abuse example, older folks need to have a healthy skepticism that when they get a call from somebody asking them for money or asking them for personal information, that they need to proceed with a little bit of caution. And, historically or currently, we do that by saying, hey, if you get a call from somebody saying that, they work with your bank, or they're calling about a child or a grandchild, you need to hang up and call your grandchild, make sure. But what we're not doing is we're not telling them, but if it's your actual grandchild calling and it's their voice and they're saying, grandma, I can't get all my parents, I need this money, like, can you please Venmo me this right now, or whatever it is. We're not, because we haven't raised awareness about how these scams are evolving, people are more likely to fall for them. So that's why raising awareness is so important, because typically it's, hey, if you get this call your grandson and make sure that they're not in jail, and that they need, and because if they answer, then but people who get the call from their grandson are not going to then call their grandson and make sure it's them, because they don't know that the technology exists to clone voices. So it's really, I'm constantly shouting this stuff from the rooftops, because I want more people to know about it.
Yeah. And who would have thought, even with the non-consensual deepfake pornography, that too is just as horrific as this AI stuff.
Yeah. And it is AI. I mean, tech deepfakes are created, we have artificial intelligence to thank for deepfakes. And, people often look at deepfakes and, if you read about them in the news, very often it's about fake news concerns or political interference, but it's a violence against women issue. People are inserting women and minors and girls into pornography without their consent. Deepfakes, just so your audience knows, is a form of face swapping. So you take, if I upload one photo of a woman to one of these deepfake websites, it will take her face from the photo and swap it onto the body of a performer in a pornographic video. And when you press play, it now looks like the victim from the photo is participating in sex acts in the video. It's her face, it's not her body. And and that's something that I've been talking about since basically it came out in 2017, and trying to sound the alarm about this. And now it's becoming more because it's getting easier to do, more people are aware of it. But it's a deeply disconcerting issue, because historically to share an intimate image of somebody without their consent, or distribute it without their consent, they needed to have either shared an intimate image with you, or you needed to have obtained it somehow. But there needed to be an authentic intimate image or video that existed in the world. And now with this technology, we're all potential victims, because you don't need authentic material anymore. You just need a photo of them. And thanks to social media, our photos are everywhere, whether it's LinkedIn or any others. Because a lot of people think, well, I don't have a social media. And I'll ask, well, do you have LinkedIn? Yeah, I have LinkedIn. Okay, well, then your photo's out there. Right? So it's probably, the manipulation is deeply problematic when it comes to that stuff.
And also in a courtroom, that would be a difficult thing to prove.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge I get, because I was sort of in early on the deepfake stuff, I get a lot of inquiries from folks on how to address this, and a lot of them will point to, well, we don't have a lot of laws around deepfake, non-consensual deepfake pornography. And that's true. They're working on a federal law and different things, but I don't put a lot of eggs in that basket, because that law will be pretty ineffectual if we don't have means to enforce it. And so, and this is kind of true with a lot of tech facilitated abuse and tech facilitated crime, and this is not, and in no way am I dunking on or slamming law enforcement or our judicial institutions. They are just undertrained, understaffed, and under-resourced to properly address all the tech facilitated and cybercrime cases that come through their door. Like they're just not. So finding out who created and distributed deepfake pornography anonymously online is very difficult. And even if you have the laws to enforce it. And I would say my take on it's great to have those laws, but I'm not a huge fan of creating new laws around technology facilitated abuse, which might sound like counter to my whole mission statement. But what I'm really trying to get folks to look at through is not look at this as a tech issue, but look at it as it's a stalking issue, it's a harassment issue, it's it's whatever, sexual violence, and we have laws for that stuff. And whether someone's being stalked, it really shouldn't matter whether it's happening online or offline. Like I don't think we should have a cyber stalking law and a stalking law. I don't separate my life into my cyber life and my offline life. It's just life. And so, and I frankly, I don't think law enforcement and judges want to have to constantly be learning and about and getting up to speed on new laws every year, because we're not becoming less reliant on technology. New technology is going to continue to come out. AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, robots, like all this stuff is really going to happen. And we don't need specified laws for each one of those things. What we need is, more education and awareness about how to navigate those issues and use the laws we already have on the books to address them.
Yeah. How often do you get to talk to these judges about this stuff? Like
Pretty often.
Mhm.
Pretty often. I'm the bio you have, I probably should have sent you a more updated one, but I'm faculty for the National Judicial College, for example. So I do a lot of I reach a lot of judges through, it's judges.org, but I reach a lot of judges through the National Judicial College. I work with a lot of different states, and I work with about 8 different states to educate their judiciary and their staff and things like that. And yeah, I've gotten to do some cool stuff. I get to advise the White House Task Force on Online Abuse and Harassment. I get to work with the World Economic Forum Digital Justice Advisory Committee. Like there's a lot of people that are interested in this issue, and there's a lot of ways to approach it from a macro level, and then also from just like a training level as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you get calls from people saying they've got these problems and they need help, or do you refer them to someone else?
Yeah, I do get those calls. I'm not, so it's as a former advocate, it's really hard for me to say no to those, but we're not a direct service organization. We're a training and education organization. So my goal is to upskill and empower and resource organizations that work with victims to help them when they're being harmed online and via their technology. And so when someone reaches out to me through my website, we refer them to organizations that are doing that work. So no, if a client organization that I've trained in the past reaches out for insight about a case, I'll help them, but I don't just help. I just don't have the bandwidth, unfortunately, to help people individually.
Now, the judges that you're training, do you think that maybe their dockets are too full and they don't get to look at this evidence as closely when it comes to the voice recognition and this deep fake pornography?
Well, I can say without a doubt that judges' dockets are too full. I mean, that's, I think, a universal. Yeah. But it depends. I think my hope is, because they care about this stuff and they don't want the wool pulled over their eyes, and they don't want to feel like they're out of their depth when dealing with a potential issue. And so the feedback that I'm getting has been really positive from these trainings, and they're very interested in approaching whether allegations of deepfake pornography or concerns about the fabrication of audio or manipulation of audio and video evidence. They're interested in looking at that more closely because they see the risk. And I just don't want anybody, judges included, but really anybody who works or comes into contact with the life of a victim to not be able to address something because they have never heard of it before, right? It's like, well, we can at least have an intelligent conversation or an informed conversation about it, even if you can't verify that in a restraining order case, the party to be restrained is the one who created and distributed it. You know, they can at least point them to resources to get it taken down or something.
Mhm. Now, are these family court judges or civil, criminal?
All.
All.
Yeah, a total mix. So yeah, municipal, civil, criminal, family law prosecutors, yeah, DAs, public defenders, really anybody. It's sort of a universal, you know, training and presentation, the presentations that I do. It's not, I mean, the trainings I do for judges are different than I would do for other folks, but generally speaking, they're pretty homogenous, because I think we just don't have, nobody really has a very good handle on this stuff. And so we just need a baseline from which to operate. And so I try to keep my work pretty consistent across all, you know, across my client base, so that, you know, everybody's getting the same information.
Mm-hmm. And that'd be hard to juggle, because every time you turn around, there's new technology coming out almost every day.
Yes,
I mean, how
it's a
fast
lot.
is it? How fast is it coming out? Is it like,
Well, recently, so that's what I often tell people is, the great thing about my work is I never run out of new stuff to talk about. And the terrible thing about my work is I never run out of new stuff to talk about, because it can be an exhausting thing. So yeah, right now we are in a season of technology that has me very focused on emerging issues, because of sort of this artificial intelligence renaissance that we find ourselves in Chat GPT, in particular, large language LLMs, large learning models, excuse me, that can do all these, you know, superhuman things. I mean, Chat GPT, you can ask it to write a brief, you can ask it to, you know, do all sorts of things, and it'll do it well. You know, it still needs a human editor, but it will create things that you just can't even believe. And so people are already using this technology to build apps and to do all sorts of different things. But it's how we get, you know, people are using it, not Chat GPT necessarily, but are using, well, you know, there are also, so there's Chat GPT, which is a chat bot essentially, but then there are also these image websites like Dolly and others that allow you to, will create imagery from a text description, right? So it's like, I want a photo of a teacup poodle riding a unicycle. I want it to appear as a sepia photo from the 1800s, and I want it to be in Paris. And it will create something that looks wholly authentic. It may take a few tries, but it's getting better. Wholly authentic and exactly what you described. And so what's unfortunate is, you know, that kind of technology also allows people to create, you know, intimate imagery of real people and of fake people. So one thing, and I've been talking about this for a long time, trying to warn people about it, and now we're still seeing it start to happen. But the FBI just recently released like a bulletin that they're seeing an uptick in people using fake nude imagery of victims to blackmail them, particularly minors. So they are creating a fake nude of a minor who they're grooming online, and then are using that image to either threaten them by saying, we're going to release this, no one's going to believe it's fake, and, you know, your parents are going to get arrested and you're going to get thrown out of school, and unless you do XYZ, right? And so, and I've been warning about this. It's what I have to yeah, it's one of those things where you know, when it starts happening, you know, on one hand, I'm hopeful that people will start taking it seriously. And on the other hand, I'm frustrated, because I've been trying to get people to take it seriously for a long time. Because you don't have to be clairvoyant to see what's coming down the road. You just look at any new technology and ask the question, how will this be misused or weaponized to harm victims? And anybody who works with victims can see the future, because it's not hard to tell, you know, somebody who works with victims of sexual violence or advocates, hey, if there was a technology out there that could swap somebody's into a video using only their photo, how do you think it would be used? Like, we'll get to pornography pretty quickly, right? It's not, you don't, I'm not a tech expert, I'm not clairvoyant, but it's just asking that question has allowed me to see, into the future. And I'm really want others to do the same, because we're just being inundated with new technologies. I mean, there's a new app out that will create a virtual version of, it's a dating app that'll create a virtual version of yourself.
Mhm.
And then create basically a bot or a chat bot that's you. And so when you match with somebody online, you can ask their chat bot, which is essentially them, questions about themselves. And so it's this like weird, and so this is where we're going, where people are using this new technology fast and furiously to develop things that I think are deeply concerning. But everybody's just so excited to use and harness the power of this new AI technology that they're, like social media platforms before them, they are not stopping to think about the safety ramifications. They are just going, pedal to the metal, trying to get some technology to market, to get funding, and they're not thinking about how it could be misused. I mean, this company that came out with the app that I was just describing, they're like a 4 or 5 person team creating this company. So if somebody reports abuse, they don't have the infrastructure, the trust and safety infrastructure to prevent or navigate or respond to people using that to harm others. And that's, needs to become industry standard, in my opinion. But
Accountability
is unfortunately absent from a lot of these platforms, because they have immunity in the eyes of the law because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. They are not liable for what people do with their technology or post on their platforms or things like that. And so they can just say, look, we didn't create that nude image of you. Like, somebody used our technology to create a nude image of you. And the argument to say, well, you should have had infrastructure in place to prevent people from creating it, but you can't sue them based on that. So and a lot of people are trying to use the courts to effect change, but the reality is we need a legislative solution or an amendment to Section 230 rather than the courts are consistently passing on doing that. They think it's the legislature's job.
Has anyone, I'm sure someone's come forward to the legislator to do something about this.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it's there's bipartisan support to different reasons, but there's bipartisan support to modify Section 230 and erode some of the immunity that these tech platforms enjoy.
But how long will that take for that to go in effect to do something about this, do you think?
If I could forecast how a divided Congress would get to some kind of unified decision on and get a law passed, then I would be working in as a political influencer. But no, I have no idea. Hopefully, I think if something gets passed, I think it'll get instituted relatively quickly, because I think people recognize how quickly technology moves, and they want to put some guardrails in place sooner rather than later.
Should parents be writing to their legislator about this now?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of work with parents. I have a whole course for parents of kids aged K through 5th grade. It's the techsavvyparent.com. And parents are frustrated, and they are disempowered, and they are overwhelmed, and they know that they need some help. They need some support It can't just all be on parents to make sure that kids are safe on these platforms. It needs to be, a group effort. It's just that, I use a lot of analogies in this work. And, the reality is in the physical world, we have a lot of guardrails and support to prevent kids from getting into dangerous situations or being exposed to content they're not developmentally ready for. I mean, if you ask a parent, hey, are you worried that your 8-year-old is going to leave school, buy a ticket to an R-rated movie and watch the movie? And the answer is no, because one, that difficult for them to get out of school. Buying an R-rated ticket is not, they're not, even if they somehow are able to do it online, going an unaccompanied minor trying to watch an R-rated movie, someone's going to see this probably and stop it from happening. But online, all those guardrails that we rely on sort of evaporate, right? They're just not there in the same way. And it puts what is a shared sort of responsibility in the physical world in our communities, puts that responsibility wholly on the shoulders of parents, who, by the way, didn't grow up with this technology, so don't even have a frame of reference or understand what kids are experiencing growing up in the digital age. So it's a real perfect storm, which is why, I'm trying to support parents through the Tech Savvy Parent, because, we have to start preparing them early for digital adolescence, because it's just we can't, parenting needs to undergo its own small adjustment, because, focusing parenting and raising kids for a world that the way parents are doing it today kind of just assumes they're never going to be online, because that's the way we've always done it. And then in middle school or late elementary school, they start demanding a phone, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And it's, well, we know this again, you don't have to be clairvoyant to know that this is going to be an issue. And I'm trying to gently sort of insert some tools and approaches that parents can take to help, their kid, to prepare their kids so that, I get this question a lot. Well, when should kids get their own cell phone, right? And the reality is, it's like when they're ready. And getting them ready sort of, I think, starts in elementary school, and helping them, navigate how to identify and basically how to have some consistency with how they behave online or offline, because kids will do and say things online that they would never do in the physical world. They'll take risks online that they don't take in the physical world, and that's unsafe. And so, but they're growing up online without a lot of guidance or supervision from their parents or from the platforms. And so and that's what we get. And it doesn't have to be that way, but parents need some support. So I think platforms need to do their part, and, parents need a plan, which I try to help with on that side of things.
Yeah. When did you start the techsavvyparent.com?
Recently, actually, I just launched it in the last fall. So it's relatively new, but it's designed to help parents, teach. Like an example is, parents are pretty, more than ever, like in the past, parents are teaching their kids about consent, right? Saying giving or getting permission. And, if you don't want to give your uncle a hug, like that's okay, instead of forcing them, because if we force them, then we're telling them, well, if somebody wants to do something, it's not up, with your body, you need to, and then they get in relationships. And so it's sort of not how we want to be teaching consent. But it always focuses on physical examples and body autonomy usually. And those lessons don't serve kids once they start getting online, because that's one, they're not going to they don't make sense in online spaces. And so what we need to do is also in the same breath, give them guidance on how to navigate giving and getting permission when the person's not standing in front of you, right? Because it's equally as important, right? And our boundaries shouldn't change online or offline, or practicing empathy, right? And is something we typically focus on physical cues and physical examples. But then the internet, I call it the empathy vacuum. It just sort of vacuums up all the cues we rely on to teach kids empathy, and we wonder why they change their behavior online, right? And so I'm trying to not overwhelm parents, but just say, hey, you're already having these conversations, just expand them a little bit, and you'll help build the foundation so that when kids do get to middle school or whenever they're ready, start asking for a phone, you're not starting from scratch. You already know, okay, I've already laid the foundation for them to navigate unsafe people online, or bullying, or empathy, or consent, or have a relationship, healthy friendships and relationships, and all the while, ensuring that kids will come to you. So by because if you're just silent on it, kids are not going to look to you as a parent as the person they should go to if they run into a, trouble. And we want parents to be that port in the storm, and that safety net for them. And by starting early and talking to them about online and offline life, even if they're just in first grade, you can just talk about consent in ways that don't involve somebody being in the room. Like, oh, if somebody gets up and leaves to go to the bathroom, is it okay to eat the food on their plate? It's like, well, no, and it gets them thinking about permission when the person's not in front of them, so that they can rely on those lessons, in online spaces as they get older.
Yeah, that's just so much for parents.
I know.
Oh.
So that's why I always say small adjustments. It's not like now you have to start doing all these different things. It's like, no. It's all the same stuff we're already doing as parents. We just need to make some small adjustments. And because parents spend a lot of time online, they can have those conversations, because we're all on our phones every day, all day, and we're online, and we know what these things are. So,
and we're also using our phones as laptops.
Yeah. I mean, it's for everything, right? Where the idea is for us to use our devices and our accounts for all things. I mean, Google and Apple, for example, they just don't want to be your email, right? Google doesn't want to be email. They want you to use it to surf the internet. They want you to use it to manage your passwords and to get directions and to do all these things, right? They want it to be sort of your one-stop shop. So I think people are more tech savvy than they give themselves credit for. And that includes parents.
But when you said, some of these apps, they can write your brief for you. Boy, that would have been handy in 2016.
Yeah, you got to be careful though. So when I said you need a human, I can't believe I say this now, but yeah, you need a human to be involved in the brief writing process, because there was a case out in New York where plaintiff's counsel was representing a victim who was suing American Airlines because he said he got his leg injured from an errant food cart or drink cart. And he submitted a motion and quoted a bunch of cases, or cited a bunch of cases. And the counsel for American Airlines said, Judge, we can't find any of these cases. So the judge had his staff attorney try to find them, and he couldn't find them either. And when they asked plaintiff's counsel what's going on here, he said that he came clean and said that he had ChatGPT do all his research and help him write the brief, and he didn't check its work. And they looked like authentic sites with quotes and citation number, everything. And it had hallucinated these cases to support his arguments. And so it's not, the technology is not there yet, but there's, people are coming out with tools for lawyers for doc review, like find every mention of this, find anything that will suit this argument, find anytime they try to, and it's helpful for finding those needles in a haystack. It's like, oh yeah, this one line email sent 3 years ago is an admission, right? So it's just, but you don't want to totally rely on the technology because they may miss something.
Well, and you have to double check the work.
Yep. It's like having a first year law student, a first year associate do it, right? Like you're not just gonna let them do the research and write a brief, or a motion, and then just submit it without checking it over first, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of the same thing here.
Oh, most definitely. What do you do, with some of these parents that have horror stories? I'm sure you've heard some horror stories. I mean, you don't have to tell them, but if you want, but it's out of control.
Yeah, growing up in a digital world as a kid, they're getting exposed to things that they're just not developmentally ready for. They're getting inundated with content and relationships and situations that a 25-year-old isn't ready for, right? And they're getting it at 7, 8 years old, and it's happening sort of in secret. And so the parents don't know that 8 and 9-year-olds are sending nudes to each other, and that's happening. I mean, there's research to support that. So yeah, it's not fair and it's not fun to talk about, but it's also not it's we can't just ignore it either, right? And so I've stolen this line from somebody else, but essentially, if parents wait until they're ready to talk about this stuff, it's likely too late, right? Because it's happening a lot earlier than they realize.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it to scare. It's just like that's the reality of our situation. And so, I mean, I just got pulled in to do a talk for 500 middle schoolers because sharing intimate images and sharing news without consent was rampant at the school. And so, fortunately, that school recognized it and was comfortable bringing me in to talk about it. Middle schools usually don't want me coming in and talking about that stuff, but it's sort of like, I sort of look at it as like abstinence only sex education. That does not work, right? If telling kids to not have sex before they're 18 doesn't work and ensures that they're engaging in sex without knowing how to have safe sex, right? And so we have sex education to say, hey, we don't want you doing this, but if you're going to do it, right, here's how to do it safely. Well, it's the same thing with this stuff. Like, you need to understand, they're sending nudes or whatever they're doing, they need to understand how risky that is, and then as kids get older, sexting needs to be done safely too. If you're going to send a nude image to somebody else, you cannot have you cannot have your face in there, right? You can't have any identifying information, so that if that image does get loose, the victim can say, that's not me, or they can have plausible deniability.
That's a lot of information parents need to know about.
Yeah. It's and I'm a parent, like I get that it's not a fun conversation to have. It's just, we live in this world now as a consequence of having all this amazing technology is, put another way, the internet was not built for kids.
No.
Shouldn't be growing up there unsupervised, right? And parents shouldn't feel bad about the state of affairs. It's not their fault, right? But now we need to make some small adjustments that will have big impact.
Well, I even got a text from one of my son's friends in high school, and it was pretty graphic and vile.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he wouldn't send this to me. He's got the wrong person. So
Yeah.
I texted back, I don't think your mother would like you talking to any woman or girl like this.
Yeah.
Then he realized he made a mistake and he was apologizing up and down. I always
This is what I mean.
Right.
They say things online they would never say in the physical world, right? It's like Lord of the Flies, right? And so, and then when you inject some consequence or accountability, I don't think your mom would like this. They recognize that they've done something wrong. That's the thing that gets me, if a trusted adult or a parent never gets involved in this online behavior, then it just runs rampant. But as soon as somebody says, hey, like, I don't think you want this getting public or your parent finding out, they're like, no, yeah, you're right. It's like, okay, so you're doing something wrong, which is true for all kids. Like, they make mistakes, they do stuff, but we have infrastructure in place to help guide them to become healthy, productive adults and not, say these things. And, in that moment, like, I would say, well, would you say that to somebody's face? And the answer is probably no, but that's not just because you shouldn't say things like that online just because you can, right? If you wouldn't say it in the physical world, don't say it online, right? And these are the kinds of things I'm constantly echoing to kids.
Yeah, I'm glad you are. I'm sorry you have to do it all the time.
No, I love my work, and I feel very lucky to be doing it. So I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Professionally.
we know more people like you going to schools and making parents well aware of this. How can parents find out about this techsavvyparent.com?
Yeah, so if you go to the techsavvyparent.com, you can find our information. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can take the course, and then my other website is EndTAB.org, EndTAB.org, and which stands for End Technology Enabled Abuse, and that's where I do my work training, doing public speaking and professional development training for organizations that work with victims.
Oh, I'm so glad we talked.
Me too.
I'd like to have you back on again.
Sure.
Yeah, most definitely. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here in the future with Adam Dodge and other exciting guests. Thank you again, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me and all the work that you do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And your work as well.